Administration for undiagnosed illnesses, and double that amount have actually gone to the Veterans Administration and entered into study groups known as ionizing radiation study groups and Gulf War depleted uranium study groups. And that's just being used as a guinea pig. So we were abused by the Department of Defense. We got sent to a contaminated battlefield. We came home, we were being studied by the Veterans Administration, and every time we turn around and look for some help, somebody calls us a post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's not appropriate. We're not stressed out, we're sick. We've been contaminated. I do what I do every day because the system hurt me.
Phyllis, you're on the air with Dennis Kine. Go ahead, please.
I just want to take time, Dennis, to thank you so much and be able to say this personally to you. And I want to urge the folks to order your book. And I can't go at the pace that I used to, and I'm so thankful for someone like you to help some of us old-timers.
It hurt me as a soldier and it hurt me as a veteran. And I don't want to see anybody else get hurt. I don't do this because I need to inflict any pain on anybody. I do this because young men and women enter voluntarily into a system to go serve their country, serve their friends, serve their family, and serve their fellow Americans, and they get duped by the recruiter from the very beginning when they're told, if you get injured or become sick, we will take care of you. And for 14 years, I've been a prime example. My family members, my brothers, are prime examples of people who never got cared for.
There's legislation in Congress right now to implement another draft. Every parent needs to decide if they're willing to send their child to be part of a military medical establishment experimentation process, because that's exactly what is going to take place. For the past 50 years, we've been experimenting upon hundreds of thousands of our military. It's incomprehensible the damage that has taken place in the lives of these servicemen and women. And it's not just the servicemen and women, it's their families, their spouses, their children that have been severely affected. It must stop. How will we ever get anyone to join the military knowing that they're going to be exposed to whatever the Department of Defense desires to do with them? Once people are aware of the massive amount of experimentation that takes place in our military, we won't have one. We won't have a group of people that will serve. And for obvious reasons. Because of the Ferris Doctrine, which has blocked any kind of compensation, assistance, or really any accountability from the Department of Defense or the military, our troops are living in some kind of slippery slope. They have no rights. With Executive Order 13139, they can be experimented upon without their consent, anytime, any place. When will it stop? How will it stop? And what must we do?
One of the, I think, problems with American law is that there is a number of ways that municipalities, states, and the federal government will often immunize themselves from what would normally be seen as tort actions. In the United States, we have something called the Ferris Doctrine, which essentially articulates a rule of sovereign immunity that says the federal government is not liable for anything that happens to you while you are in military service. The doctrine originates from the year 1950, and the court at that time heard the case of a military serviceman who was killed in a barracks fire, and ultimately decided that it was good public policy not to allow these lawsuits.
This really is the ultimate in hypocrisy. You see the heroic search and rescue missions where the government is very publicly going in and rescuing prisoners of war in combat, and the message there, or the propaganda if you will, is that we care about you, the soldier. The reality is very different. The reality is that they are shielding themselves behind an outdated legislation and using the soldiers essentially as pawns in a chess game.
The Ferris case was literally about a serviceman who was injured in a barracks fire in New York State. That's a very different kind of case than the subsequent cases that have been brought to the Supreme Court. A case like depleted uranium or Agent Orange or something like the Tuskegee experiment. This is about the government knowingly allowing you to be injured. Some would argue intentionally allowing it to happen, certainly behaving through gross negligence to allow you to suffer injury to yourself. And the courts have consistently, for the last 5 decades, upheld this as a legal doctrine that is alive and well in this country. Now, recently, in the late 1980s, ironically, one of the most conservative justices, Justice Scalia, has indicated in a decision where he was joined by 3 other justices that the Ferris Doctrine was wrongly decided. And so there's some hope that the court is starting to see that a doctrine that began over the principle of negligence ought not be applied when you get into really criminal knowledge.
BeyondTreason.com will be a focal point, an area where people can go to find out what can be done, what needs to be done, and how to help. We must all join together to say, enough is enough. You see, if they experiment upon the military, the citizens are next. We can no longer play the role of esprit de corps in the military, of patriotism, of blind patriotism. We must accept the fact that it is our fault that we have allowed this to take place in this country. We call ourselves Americans, and this is freedom, and yet our sons and daughters are dying. Those that are responsible for these acts should spend the rest of their natural lives in prison for what they have done. There is no question, from the presidents on down for the past 50 years, those that have been in charge of these experiments, there is no question that this is truly beyond treason.